ISIS now claiming responsibility for a series of deadly shootings in central Jordan on Sunday. 9 Jordanians and a Canadian tourist, they were all killed. Dozens of others injured. Jordanian security forces say that they later shot and killed 4 of the gunmen during a standoff.
There's been a surge in gun sales being reported in the state of California. This ahead of sweeping gun control laws set to take effect in that state in the new year 2017. William Lajeunesse live in that story in L.A. in our bureau there. And what is the story? William, good morning.
Bill, the clock is ticking for California gun owners and those who may want to own one. In just over a week, Californians will be banned from buying so-called assault-style rifles with easily detachable magazines. But because California has a mandatory 10-day waiting period, buyers have just 1 day left to buy America's most popular rifle, the AR-15, and they must pick it up by December 31st, or else they will not be allowed to take possession.
I'm here because I believe in a system of love and karma, but to counterbalance that, if it fails, I'm buying an AK-47 today.
Do I need the weapon I just purchased? No. Did I purchase it anyway? Yes. That's the bottom line, is they took the choice away from responsible adults or irresponsible adults one way or another. They took the choice away completely.
So gun sales here, including handguns, are up 40% this year to over 1 million, and semi-automatic rifle sales have doubled.
That's amazing numbers. What else is fueling this surge in California?
Well, Governor Brown signed a package of gun control bills this year that also require owners to register their semi-automatic rifles with the state. Buyers of ammunition will need a permit and undergo a background check in 2018. And there is now a ban on any magazine that holds more than 10 rounds. Lawmaker Mark Levine called the restrictions necessary because, and I'm quoting, anxiety and strife are being sowed throughout American society. The legislature acted to limit bloodshed in our communities. Critics say none of the bills, however, address criminal behavior.
We have true criminals out there that could care less about this stuff, and Joe Public that does care, that's legitimately scared about this, doesn't even know where to begin to be compliant.
So come January, anyone with a 10-round magazine or more will be required to turn it over to police. Many bills say they won't, which would make thousands of otherwise law-abiding gun owners criminals next year.
William, thank you. 2017, right around the corner. William Lajeunesse in Los Angeles. Thank you, sir.
A desperate manhunt now underway in one of Europe's largest capital cities for the driver suspected of plowing a truck straight into a crowd at a Christmas market in Berlin. The latest on this fast-developing story up next.
It is 10 a.m. here in New York. It is 4 o'clock in Berlin. Fox News alert now, terror and chaos striking across Europe yet again. A Russian ambassador assassinated in Turkey while a truck plows through a Christmas market in Berlin. 12 dead in Berlin, dozens injured. The driver believed to be still on the run at this hour. There is a report at daybreak that he was in custody. There's some confusion on that right now as we come to you live from New York. So, new hour, big day of news. I'm Bill Hemmer, and welcome here to America's Newsroom.
Yeah, lots changing very quickly. I'm in for Martha McCallum. I'm Heather Childers. The new details emerging on 2 attacks that have put the world on notice. In Germany, police revealing that a suspect is still on the run and may be armed. They do have one in custody, an immigrant from Pakistan who had claimed asylum.
Meanwhile, Russia now sending their own investigators into Turkey after their ambassador was shot and killed at an art gallery just yesterday.
And we begin with Rich Edson live at the State Department. Rich, what are U.S. officials saying about the Turkish shooter?
Good morning, Heather. And U.S. officials are saying the shooter was an off-duty police officer in Turkey, and he used his police credentials to gain access to that area where the Russian ambassador to Turkey was presenting at an art exhibit in Ankara. However, several reports claim the State Department is still unaware of exactly how that person managed to position themselves behind the Russian ambassador before shooting and killing him. Several reports claim the killer died following a shootout with police at the gallery. In the video, after the shooter kills the ambassador, he shouts about Syria and Aleppo. Russia has been propping up the Assad regime in Syria. Also in Ankara, where this happened, in Turkey's capital city, a State Department official confirms a man is in custody after firing a gun near the entrance of the U.S. embassy there. So with that, the U.S. State Department has decided decided to close its embassies and consulates in Turkey today, Heather.
So switching gears, the second attack in Berlin. What do we know about the Berlin attack?
Well, police are still investigating this. Berlin and German officials are claiming this is a suspected terrorist attack. They say the person they have in custody, and you mentioned him, the Pakistani man who had immigrated to Germany, who's seeking asylum there. What officials are saying is they have still yet to determine whether that person is responsible for this attack. So that's led to the confusion as to whether there's still an investigation or a manhunt ongoing in that area. There has been no claim of responsibility yet. However, last month in ISIS's magazine, it urged vehicle attacks to cause mass casualties during events that draw large crowds, much like this Christmas market in Berlin. And remember, in July, there was that truck attack that killed more than 80 people during the Bastille Day holiday in Nice, France. In November, also, the State Department urged Americans who were traveling to Europe to exercise caution at holiday festivals, events, and outdoor markets. State Department officials say there was no specific intelligence that led them to issue that warning. It was more of a routine type of warning to Americans who were traveling to these large events, given some of the things that have happened in the past.
All right.
Heather, back to you.
Thank you so much. We'll continue to follow the developments. Thanks.
A lot to cover here. Retired Army General Ray Odierno commanded U.S. forces in Iraq from 2008 to 2010. He's a former Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army. He joins me by telephone now. And General, nice to talk to you again. Thank you for your time.
Nice to talk to you, Phil.
Let's start in Berlin. If confirmed, and this indeed was a terror attack at the holiday, what are the challenges? What are the changes in refugee policy, either there or here or both, sir?
Well, I think, first off, these attacks are driven by propaganda, and we have to realize that they are here, and we have to deal with them. And I think we have to make sure we take a comprehensive approach to deal with this, and one of those is tightening up and making sure we do proper vetting. I think that we should have an international agreement on how we do that. I think we should cooperate with all other nations. But here in the United States specifically, we need to tighten up on that. And there's several other actions we need to take as well.
Such as?
Well, I would say, first off, I think, again, a comprehensive approach by our government. We have to have a robust, ready military that's capable of responding around the world and not take the military off the table as an option, which is we've done for several years now. It's important that they're ready, capable, prepared to be used, because people respect our military and understand the capabilities that they have. We must go after the propaganda that's out there, on specifically the use of social media and how ISIS and these other radical Islamists have used social media to recruit. We have to go after that. We have to come up with a common understanding on how we're going to attack this and not allow them to use these capabilities in order to convince people to conduct attacks on innocent people. We have to go after funding of ISIS and other extremist organizations, Islamic extremist organizations. And we can do that through international cooperation, going after how they're getting their money, how are they able to fund some of the things that we're doing. So I believe this is a time of proactive leadership to deal with this problem of radical Islamic extremism head on. And it's time for us to take action.
How different would that be in a new administration on behalf of Donald Trump as opposed to what we've seen for 8 years, General?
What I would say is I think we've chosen, for a lot of reasons in this current administration, to lead from behind. It is now time for us to lead from the front. Be aggressive at bringing nations together. Be aggressive in our own policies and bringing the capabilities of our government together to take action. And I think it's time that we've done that. And I think we're starting to put the right leadership in place with General Mattis as Secretary of Defense and Vincent Viola as Secretary of the Army.
Yeah, now you start to see the strategy. Let me get to Mr. Viola in a moment here. But what is different about Berlin appears this truck driver, if he has not yet been apprehended, if these stories are true, he did not do this to die. This was not a suicide mission, which can be a bit different from a lot of the other attacks we have seen. So we'll get back to Berlin in a moment, but now let's move to Russia and what happened in Turkey with the ambassador killed yesterday and assassinated. Vladimir Putin has already come out and said that they will get the bandits, and you know how he has responded in various parts of the world when terror strikes his people. But when you look at the nexus between Russia and Turkey and Syria and Iran, what is your biggest concern about that region of the world and a conflict that has raged on for 5+ years, sir?
Well, first off, I think this could be a whole different attack. For example, This could be somebody who is supporting the Syrian rebels and does not like the fact that Russia has supported the current government. So I'm not sure. I'd have to wait and see. I'm not sure we'll ever know for sure that the individual has been killed. But it just shows the underlying problems that we continue to see in the Middle East, the complexity of it. This complexity of Iran, Saudi Arabia, Sunni, Shia, Islamic extremists. It is a very complex problem that's going to take complex solutions. It's going to take cooperation. It's going to take U.S. leadership. Frankly, we've given up our leadership in the region to Russia. And I think it's time for us to reassert our leadership.
Well, on that point then, do you expect that to change under a President Trump?
I think his comments have been very clear that he wants to take action. I think, again, he's putting a team in place that will allow us to do that. And I think it's important that we reassert ourselves in the Middle East and, frankly, in other places around the world as well.
As you say, it is deeply complicated. You mentioned Vincent Viola, Secretary of the Army. He apparently will be nominated on behalf of Donald Trump. You mentioned James Mattis at the Defense Department, and he has gotten great reviews from both sides, Republicans and Democrats. How well do you know Vincent Viola, and why do you believe he is the right man for this job?
Well, I know him very well. I've known him for many, many, many years. We were at West Point together a very long time ago, so I've known him for over 40 years. First off, he served in the Army. He understands what the sacrifice is. He's a self-made man. Started with nothing, made himself into something very important. He never lost that connection to the military. He understands the international issues. He understands the business part of the military. I believe he's going to bring an energy that we need. He has a love of soldiers. He is going to do everything he can to help rebuild the readiness of our military, specifically our Army. He will do everything he can to increase our modernization, make sure we have the right numbers, that we can tackle all these very difficult problems. He has continued to stay engaged with the military throughout his entire life, whether it be starting the Counterterrorism Center at West Point, whether it be in rewriting how we study history in the military. He played a huge role in that. He's been somebody who's dedicated his life, even though he was in the business world, to supporting our military. So I think we have a leader with vision. I think we have a leader with high character. I think we have a leader who's willing to make difficult decisions, willing to take calculated risks. And I think him working with Jim Mattis, who has a wealth of experience, a great friend who I've worked with for so many years, who is incredibly intelligent, smart, understands the issues, and understands the challenges that we face. And so I'm encouraged by these first two appointees.
It's an impressive resume. Sir, thank you for your time. Hope to see you in person real soon, General.
Okay, Bill.
Ray Odierno on the telephone there on a day where there are many headlines to discuss. Sir, again, thanks to you. In a moment here, much more coming up on all of this, the American response and what's happening globally. State Department spokesman John Kirby will be our guest. That's coming up at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll talk to the Admiral in about 20 minutes from now.
And this Fox News alert, a federal judge ordering the FBI to unseal the search warrant that led the agency to reopen its case into Hillary Clinton's emails just days before the election. That is expected to happen in just about 2 hours from now. Kristen Fisher has more. She's live for us from Washington. So, Kristen, why is the search warrant being unsealed now at this point?
Because the federal judge overseeing the case says that the public has a right to see it. He's placing public interest over privacy concerns. But the judge did warn that portions of this search warrant are going to be blacked out or redacted to protect the identity of the investigating agents. Now, this is a big deal because we're about to get our first glimpse at the documents that the FBI used to reopen its investigation into Clinton's emails just 11 days before the election. Many Democrats have said they believe that cost her the election, including her husband, former President Bill Clinton. He said yesterday that, quote, she fought through everything and she prevailed against it all. But at the end, we had the Russians and the FBI deal and she couldn't prevail against them. But Mr. Trump's advisors argue that's just another excuse. They believe he would have won regardless. But Heather, it certainly didn't hurt.
All right, Kristen Fisher live for us. Thank you, Kristen.
Right, about 11 minutes past the hour. Now I want to get back to Berlin. The world on high alert now. We're looking for answers, trying to figure out what happened here. Police hunt now for the person or persons responsible for this truck attack. They thought they had their man, and apparently that has not been confirmed. A Christmas market in Berlin has been hit in a deadly way. In a moment, we'll get the latest reaction. Chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, Senator Ron Johnson, is our guest live in a moment out of D.C. Plus, there is this.
Texas now puts President Trump over the top.
And with that, Donald Trump officially elected our next president despite a Democratic effort to convince electors to change their votes. Would there be more outrage if Republicans tried the same thing? We'll have a fair and balanced debate ahead.
Washington State today, Martha, 4 Hillary Clinton electors switched their vote, 3 to Colin Powell and 1 to a woman named Faith Spotted Eagle. Those 4 electoral votes that were supposed to go to Hillary Clinton, through their effort, not only did she not pick them up, she lost them. So it's almost weird how many times their efforts backfire.
So from Berlin, Germany now, working to determine if the man they have in custody is the one responsible, being the driver in that Christmas market truck attack. A lot of confusion as to this arrest earlier today. They are investigating this as terrorism. Republican Senator Ron Johnson out of Wisconsin, chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, with me now in Washington, D.C., and fresh off a trip to Israel where he saw the prime minister and more, and I'll ask you about that in a moment. What do you want to add about these developments in Berlin, knowing the story is not yet complete, sir?
Well, we do need to make sure that we find out exactly, who perpetrated this. Was this individual part of the migrant flow? Is this a inspired lone wolf? Is it directed attack on ISIS? I mean, that's in America. We've experienced inspired lone wolves, but we've seen directed wolf packs. For example, in Brussels airport in Istanbul. These are serious considerations because we have not defeated ISIS. They continue to train operatives, and this has a spillover effect, and we're seeing it really across the world. So right now the world's a mess because America has been weak. The strategy of peace through withdrawal has been a miserable failure. We actually have to achieve peace through strength, starting with economic strength.
In what sense?
Well, we're not even beginning to realize the full potential of the American economy because of grotesque overregulation at $2 trillion per year, a regulatory burden that's $14,800 per year per household, uncompetitive tax system, certainly people that are not utilizing our energy resources so that we remain globally competitive. So we've been growing about 2%. Since the Great Depression, on average, American economy has produced 3.2% annual growth. We've got to at least get to 3, possibly 4. That'll give us the resources to strengthen our military so we can actually defeat ISIS, so we can really project strength and our leadership and values in the world.
As a businessman, then, you see the connection between a strong economy as being the key to a strong country overseas.
Absolutely. When we project weakness, whether it's militarily, poor strategy, or economic weakness. And let's face it, people can do math. They see, for example, we're almost $20 trillion in debt. We have a projected deficit over the next 30 years of $103 trillion. America is perceived as weak, which is why you see the aggression on the part of Russia and Iran and China in the South China Sea. So we have to first become strong economically. When we draw a line in the sand, the world has to realize that we're going to actually maintain that line in the sand. So again, it's doing what you say you're going to do, but we've just got to become stronger both economically and militarily.
It's an interesting analysis. Donald Trump tweeted earlier today the following. Today there were terror attacks in Turkey, Switzerland, Germany. It's only getting worse. The civilized world must change thinking. The civilized world must change its thinking. I guess you could throw in Libya. You could throw in Jordan. You could throw in Yemen. All of that happened in the last 36 hours. Well, when he says change your thinking, can you define that?
Well, from my standpoint, again, it's focusing on economic growth, economic strength, and also recognizing who your friends are, supporting your friends, strengthening your friends. Let's not weaken people. Let's face it, for decades, by having administrations forcing, for example, Israel, I just came back from there, sitting down and negotiating with individuals who don't even recognize the right of Israel to exist, forcing them into making concessions. It's weakened Israel when what we ought to be doing is strengthening the democracy, the strong economy in the Middle East that can provide stability in the Middle East. Things aren't exploding in the Middle East because of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. That's been a straw dog. Things are disintegrating in the Middle East because we have not shown and projected the strength that we really need to in our leadership.
Interesting point. What else did you learn on that trip?
Well, here's a
that
narrative.
is relevant, perhaps, to all these topics that we're talking about today.
Well, we did visit the 260-kilometer fence that actually works in the southern border there with the Sinai, built for about $1.5 million per mile. So a very affordable fence, a very effective fence. Plus, the narrative is that Israel has not been allowing foodstuffs and basically starving the Gaza Strip. Nothing could be further from the truth. We visited the crossing at Karim Shalom. Close to 800 trucks per day are providing goods to the people of Gaza. So Israel is trying to help the people of Gaza. Unfortunately, don't have a leadership in Gaza, and Hamas is actually willing to sit down and negotiate a true peace.
Did their leaders express to you any feeling toward the incoming president?
Well, I think there's a great deal of optimism, quite honestly. I don't want to put words in Prime Minister Netanyahu's mouth, but I think they perceive somebody in administration coming in that will support Israel, that will back them, that will help strengthen Israel, recognizing that is good for the Middle East stability and peace, is good for world stability and peace as well. So I think it'll be a completely attitude. Rather than demonizing Israel, we're going to actually be there to support, to be Israel's friend. I think it'll make a world of difference.
Welcome home, Senator. Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Have a Merry Christmas.
Ron Johnson, the Republican of Wisconsin, they're in Washington, D.C. Thanks.
Still to come, Vladimir Putin and the president of Turkey responding after that violent public killing of Russia's ambassador to Turkey. Relations were already fragile between the two countries, so what happens now?
Also, church leaders coming together after the killing of a 3-year-old in an apparent case of road rage, searching for answers and searching for a suspect.
We want to let the city know that we are on the lookout for whoever this guy is, and for where this happened at. This guy had to be coming from someone's house.
Hey, Fox News alert on yesterday's assassination of Russia's ambassador to Turkey. An off-duty riot policeman gunned down the ambassador during a photo exhibit and was later killed in a shootout. Now, the leaders of both countries say that it's an attempt to undermine their effort to repair ties. And now Vladimir Putin is pointing a finger at the West. Jillian Turner is a Fox News contributor, and she joins us now with some more insight. Hi, Jillian. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Heather.
So here's what President Putin had to say. He said that this attack is a provocation aimed at disrupting our relations. What do you believe was behind this attack?
The way I see it, it comes down to a couple of options here. It was either an act of Islamic terrorism, which was motivated by radical ideology, or it can be an act of political opposition, political retaliation for what is perceived as Russia's humanitarian crisis that they've precipitated in Syria, or it's a combination of both. I'm going to remind everyone that the perpetrator yesterday invoked both Allah and Aleppo in his final moments. So I think that the investigation will kind of tease that out a little bit more, but the likelihood here is that it's not as straightforward as it seems. It's probably a combination of both.
Yeah,
human motivations are complicated.
Yeah, he yelled Allah Akbar, God is great in Arabic, and then during the incident he also said, don't forget Syria, don't forget Aleppo. Now, when I talk about the two sides disagreeing, Russia believes that Bashar al-Assad should still be in power. Turkey backs the rebels. Who's a part of those rebels?
Well, the rebels on the ground in Syria are a mix of folks that oppose the Assad regime that's currently in power, and they're the ones that precipitated the civil unrest that has been percolating now for 5 years, that's erupted into a full-scale civil war. But what's happened is that, as you know well, we've talked about this before, terrorists take advantage of ungoverned spaces and political chaos and insert themselves on the ground, which is something they've done here. Affiliates and offshoots of Al-Qaeda are active in the region now, as is ISIS. We've been talking about that a lot. So really, there's a whole mix of, when we talk about the Syrian opposition now, there's moderates, there's radicals, and there's terrorists.
Yeah, that's why I asked that question, just so people at home knew that, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, all of that is in with the rebels right now. So it's a difficult situation. And that being said, how should the incoming Trump administration respond? The president-elect immediately coming out and, saying that this is terrorism, radical Islamic terrorism.
The Trump administration is going to need to be, and I think is poised to come out sort of guns blazing, for lack of a better expression on this. They're going to be tough on combating terrorism, but there's an element to this story, to what happened yesterday, that I think serves as a cautionary tale for the Trump administration in particular, and in general for world leaders, which is that the Russian regime has been dishonest with the United States for the past several years on every issue, whether they're illegal incursions into Ukraine and Georgia, whether being dishonest about their motivations for entering into Syria in the first place. They still maintain that they're there to combat ISIS, but as we all know, they've been busy killing thousands of civilians on a weekly basis. So I think what we're seeing here, if this gentleman who, not a gentleman, if the attacker yesterday who murdered the Russian ambassador was really protesting against Putin's humanitarian atrocities in Syria, this is something that we're going to see replicated over and over again across the region in coming years.
Yeah.
People are outraged about this, as they should be.
Right. But also those events that you just mentioned, and we've run out of time here, are incidents, many of them, that happened under the Obama administration. So a lot of people will be looking to see how the president-elect responds. Thank you so much, Jillian. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Heather.
Clearly, there are so many hot spots as you watched our coverage for the past 90 minutes. The terror striking in the holiday in Berlin. You've got the attack on the ambassador gunned down in Turkey, and so many other hot spots. State Department spokesman John Kirby is on deck to address all of this and what comes next. We'll talk to him live about it.
And here's this. The kettle jump stunt by the Dallas Cowboys star running back has made for an interesting response for the Salvation Army. We'll tell you all about that.
It is 10:31 in New York. Many parts of the world now on high alert. This was the scene in Berlin after a truck plowed through a crowded Christmas market, killing 12, wounding dozens. There is still confusion about who's responsible at this hour. Also in Turkey, Russian ambassador assassinated in front of a stunned audience at an art exhibition. And part of the thing that drives that story home even more is the fact that a photographer was taking pictures of the assassination. From the State Department, spokesman John Kirby is with me now. And sir, good day to you and good morning, and thanks for coming back in America's Newsroom. I got a lot to go through, okay, so let's get to as much as we can. Ron Johnson, Republican senator from Wisconsin, just 20 minutes ago said the following about the world and the U.S. standing in that world. Just watch this.
We have not defeated ISIS. They continue to train operatives, and this has a spillover effect, and we're seeing it really across the world. So right now the world's a mess because America has been weak. The strategy of peace through withdrawal has been a miserable failure. We actually have to achieve peace through strength, starting with economic strength.
You know, he certainly had a lot to say. Is the world more dangerous 8 years later?
Well, there's certainly dangers and things out there that we need to be mindful of, and obviously terrorism is top on that list. There's no question about that. This is a very complex, dynamic world we're living in. But I actually take strong issue with this idea that we've somehow tried to achieve peace through withdrawal. If you look around the world, the United States is actually more engaged now in more places than we've ever been before, from the Pacific all the way to the Middle East, and we're going to stay at that. And terrorism is not and should never be a partisan issue. It is not or should not simply just be something that one or two nation states focus on, but all of us need to focus on it because it is a pervasive threat. The other thing I would say is that we freely admit that Daesh, ISIS, is not defeated yet, but they are absolutely severely degraded from where they were just even a year ago. They haven't, with the exception of Palmyra, haven't captured any new territory since May of 2015. They've lost tens of thousands of their fighters, hundreds of their leaders. Their resources are drying up.
Yeah, that may be true, but I'm looking at Libya from yesterday and Jordan and Switzerland and Berlin and Turkey, and all of this has a thread that runs through it. But I think in the big picture, this is what I see. ISIS has spread to dozens of countries. Russia's exerting itself in a way that it has not before. And you've got China moving weapons reportedly to islands in the South Pacific. It would appear yet again that the world is a dangerous place, and likely more so than it was 8 years ago.
I don't know that the world's ever been a completely safe place, Bill, and certainly I don't dispute the idea that that groups like ISIS, through a pernicious narrative, are trying to attract foreign fighters and are trying to advance their narrative by inspiring these sorts of low cost, low resource terrorist attacks. And again, we still have to let the investigations play out here in Berlin.
None of that is acceptable, is it?
Of course not. Of course not, which is why the United States led the formation of a 67-member now coalition. 67 members, most nation states, against ISIS in Iraq and in Syria, and why we have been successful. But yes, look, we knew as part of the strategy that as they got more pressurized in Iraq and Syria, that they would try to squeak out and try to inspire cells and individual foreign fighters or self-radicalized individuals in other countries around the world, which is why the interagency here in the United States is working so hard and so closely, not only amongst ourselves, but with our partners around the world to try to beat that back.
You know, Republicans would argue, and you started to go there, sir, and let me just backtrack a little bit. When they talk about a power vacuum that has been left in the world, there's evidence that that is true. You know, when you make decisions that change U.S. policy, there's a cause and effect there. And now you wonder how the new administration will respond to that. Quickly on that, then I'm going to go to Russia.
Well, I can't speak for the new administration. That's for them to speak to in terms of what foreign policy agenda items that they're going to pursue. But we don't agree that there has been a power vacuum left in terms of the United States. We are still the world's leader. We are still the nation that people come to for answers and solutions and for help when things go wrong. And we are more engaged in the Pacific region. Yes, there are tensions in the South China Sea with China, and we have been very vocal about that and very present with both our Navy and our Air Forces. And yes, there's tension with Russia. We absolutely don't agree with everything on Russia, particularly what they've done in Ukraine and with this annexation of Crimea. But where there are common grounds, we try to find those common grounds. We try to work with them, and we did on the Iran deal. We thought we could get there on Syria with Russia. Obviously, that didn't happen.
It's a mess.
Nobody's happy.
Nobody. Vladimir Putin said this yesterday. There can only be one response, stepping up the fight against terrorism. The bandits will feel this happening. What is the expected or anticipated response on behalf of the Russians and Vladimir Putin?
I think only Vladimir Putin knows that, and probably only him in his own country. I don't know. Clearly, we understand that they will, as this investigation goes on and as they learn more, they will feel compelled to react and respond.
Will this administration work with him on that?
I think it's going to depend on what decisions he makes, Bill, and which way he wants to go. If the answer, however, is that they just step up the indiscriminate bombing and the support to the Assad regime in Syria, if that's the answer to what happened yesterday in Turkey, well, then that's not going to be something that we would cooperate with. It's not something we would support, and it's obviously something we wouldn't counsel them doing. Because as we've said all along, more bombing, more bloodshed in Syria is not going to bring the civil war to a close any faster. It's only going to drag it on.
Berlin, if confirmed, what changes are necessary for refugee policy, either in Europe or here at home, specifically the U.S.?
I think, first of all, we need to let this investigation run its course. You've seen conflicting reports out of Germany today about the alleged attacker and who that person might have been or who not, who it wasn't. So I think before we start getting way ahead of ourselves on refugee policy, we need to let the investigation take its course. Look, here in the United States, we have been very, very careful about the vetting and the introduction of refugees into this country, not just from the Middle East, but from around the world. We've taken in 10,000 Syrian refugees this year. The president would like to bring more in next year. That President Obama would like to bring more in next year. The next administration is going to have to decide for themselves. But I would tell you, Bill, and we've talked about this before on your show and on your network, less than 1% of the refugees that we've taken in over the last 20 to 30 years have had to leave the country for some sort of violent behavior, whether it was extremism or not.
And clearly, there's a difference of opinion on that policy. And we'll see how the Trump team changes that. I don't think we're going to get to a final answer in this discussion on that. Two more quick points, quickly. Is the China drone, is that matter over now, yes or no?
I've been told by the United States Navy that they have it now back in their possession, so in terms of the theft of it and the return, that's over. But obviously, look, we're mindful of the tensions there in the South China Sea, and what they did nothing to de-escalate the tensions that we're all feeling there.
Final question. You go to private life very soon. What advice do you have for your successor or successors?
Well, I tell you, that's a great question, Bill. I think number one is to really value the power that's resident in independent press reporting. The bullpen here at the State Department is a wonderful bullpen of reporters that care a lot about foreign policy. They care about what the United States is doing around the world, and they're not afraid, believe me, I face it every day, to scrutinize and criticize those decisions. And I think that's a really valuable interchange that we have. So my first piece of advice would be to enjoy, learn from, and really appreciate the pushback, the criticism, the scrutiny that you get from independent reporting right here at the State Department. And I
can respect that. Are you optimistic about a President Trump?
I think every American today needs to pull together here. The election's over. And the American people have spoken. We need to respect that voice. That's who we are as Americans. And I think all of us need to pull together and do what we can to make the next administration successful. I tell you, that's what we're focused on here at the State Department. We're all preparing the next team that comes in here to the State Department for their ability to lead. That's what we're focused on. I think we all need to
You have always been a gentleman to us, and I thank you for that. The
Thanks,
former
Bill.
Admiral John Kirby, the State Department, prior to that, the Pentagon. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Bill.
Look forward to seeing
My
you
pleasure.
soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Speaking of coming together, the Electoral College making Donald Trump's victory official despite plenty of drama and controversy.
You don't deserve to be in America!
Electors inundated with pleas, protests, even threats to keep Donald Trump out of the White House. That has RNC spokesman Sean Spicer asking, where's the outrage?
I really do feel bad for them. I'm not sure what step they're on in their 12-step program for getting over the loss in this election, but I do wish them well, and I hope that they get better and have a good Christmas.